forgotten, and so he or she, I think it's a he, has a meeting with cakes and all kinds of good things, and they sit around and they talk about how they can advocate for their school, their part of the district. They talk about playground equipment. They talk about more teaching aids. They talk about getting more funds, and they are kind of, I think they kind of divide themselves from the rest of the district instead of unify themselves with the rest of the district.
Kind of a little special interest group, maybe.
Special interest group.
Okay.
And then they talk about why that might not be a good idea.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, so he goes around the room and says, hey, tell us what you think. What should we strategize on together and whatnot? Okay, very good. Any other input on that? Great. So then the author of the book says, hey, there's a better way to go about this, and what are his suggestions? What does he have to say about that? And what are the options? Who recalls those?
Well, my only comment would be, I think we all realized that when we campaigned to get on the board, we might have had certain groups supporting us and our platforms, but once you're on the board, and this is pretty commonsensical, you represent everybody, every constituent, whether you agree with them or not. You still represent them, and you still to them, and see if you can.
On this kitchen cabinet meeting, right? They called it this special interest group meeting. If you're listening more to one group over another, you're probably missing the mark, is what they're suggesting here. You may think your job as a school board member is to represent your supporters, but in reality, just exactly like Jane said, once you're elected, your job is to represent everyone in the district, not the people whose kids live in the south part of town. Just like here, right, the south part of town is really economically depressed, only several $million-dollar homes in the south part of Prescott, so that's kind of a real similar situation there. No, if we're not here to represent one school or one political ideology or anything like that. It's everybody, right? And we've talked about this before. There's like 68,000 people who live in our school district, and you, in one way or another, represent all of them. So the options that they came up with were: you can continue to meet with them, just less frequently, right? Not a good idea. Refuse to meet with anybody. Maybe also not a good idea. Listed some chuckles there. Continue to meet with those folks, but really have them just focus on getting you reelected, because that's going to come up soon. And they did mention there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. If you've got a potentially difficult campaign coming up, you can certainly have a core group of people that you work with to work on that. That's separate from this issue. And then the last two, I said both 4 and 5 had elements of what would be good options. 4 and 5. Hold informal meetings with interested constituents from the entire district from time to time. Hey, I'm going to be at the Raven every other Tuesday from 6 to 8. If you're interested in talking with me about what's something in the school district, don't hesitate to come by. And making that widely available to people, not the 6 people who've been coming to your house. Or last one, meet or talk by phone with anyone in your district who wants to talk with you, which I think is the approach that each of you take. Any other thoughts around this one? I underlined for myself as far as the superintendent's lessons learned. What did I, let's see. Yeah, if there was somebody who came to me and said, hey, I was talking with these 6 people and they're really interested in this specific issue, and they feel like, this issue is not getting attention and other things are, talk with them and point out, hey, that we really need to be looking at the big picture together. So if this is part of that, let's do it. And, assuring a school board member who says that, the district's rich schools are getting more attention or more resources than the district's poor schools, say, let me look into that and see, if there's facts to back up that assertion. That's important, because what we want to do is treat everybody equitably. So, those were the takeaways that were supposed to be for me. Anything else on that one? We've kind of seen this in some school board members and other school boards in current areas or the past, and seen that it doesn't really end up working well for constituents at large. So I really appreciate the approach that I see each of you have taken from the very start of your service on the board, which is to not only say publicly, I'm interested in what everybody has to say, but to walk that talk as well. That's super cool.
Part of it is, what I got from it was just kind of, and the example, what they recommended was, you do represent everybody.
Yeah.
But part of that is you become more educated on the duties of the board, and then more information that you get. And while you may go into the campaign, none of us know the job before we go in, and we're not getting all the information. So to be able to pull yourself aside, and then you can reasonably have a discussion with somebody, and take their, listen to them, and then really point them in the right direction, or figure out, the best way to respond. Like chapters 1 through 14 guides you to do. I'm just kidding. But
Great, I think, great. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, just that,
Please.
The idea of representing everybody, and what's been brought up before is that I'm listening to the taxpayers. Well, everyone at this table is a taxpayer in our district. So they may not have the same opinion as who you think is giving you that view. The other part is not to discount what our staff and parents have to say just because they're working in the schools or they're involved in the schools. And I think that has happened in the past too. We've discounted teachers because, well, they work for the district. Of course they're going to be supportive. Okay, but that's their point of view, and they are a taxpayer. So we have to listen to those things. We can't just take one slice of our community and accept that.
Great thoughts. Anything else? Okay, so number 16, when I read the title initially, I got a little bit of heartburn because our board has been kind of accused of this recently. But then as I read the scenario, it actually fits in some ways. Well, we'll get to that. Okay, so the title is Minimize Public Input, right? We've had some people in the audience in the last 6 months who said, you're minimizing public input, you shouldn't do that. And it says that's a terrible habit. So what was the scenario on this?
I think he's a lightweight because he's only got 18 cards in his pile and 3 minutes for each. I mean,
We've done
come on.
way more than that.
I mean, we've had triple that in a meeting here, so.
We've also had 4-hour meetings with no public input at all.
So the temporary presider of the board meeting.
Sam was out of town, somebody else sat in his chair that evening.
Yeah, board
Yeah.
president's out of town. The next person in line, they say, sits in the seat, calculates the amount of time it's going to take for 3 minutes per person at 18 cards, and midway through realizes that they're allowing too much time for speakers and decides to cut off the public comment period before everyone has had a chance to speak. And that creates unrest in the audience, and a really bad feeling is left in the board members' personal situation as well as the people attending the meeting, because they didn't get a chance to speak their minds.
Great.
And they came specifically for that reason.
Yeah, great. I think in my mind there's a number of missteps here. The first thing, though, that I thought was interesting, I was, again, that this board does what, this hypothetical, whatever board in our book, does what our board has decided to do, many other boards have decided to do, which is people can speak to a voting member, it sounds like, right? It's not an open call to public. It's not saying, if you don't have an open call to public, you're minimizing public input. That wasn't the scenario at all. The scenario here was there was an open call to public, and they limited that in ways that felt uncomfortable with people. And Andy, you pointed them out, right? First of all, they let some people talk much longer, right, than the time frame that's been published for folks, which led to problems. And partway through, kind of pulled the expectation rug out from everybody who thought they were going to speak that evening. Instead of saying, listen, we do have a board policy, we can limit this to 30 minutes, I'm going to do that, and having people go, oh, shoot, at the beginning, got them all ready, okay, I'm next, and then said, nope, sorry, I'm changed my mind, and that's pretty tough. I can't remember a scenario. Sarah, maybe you can help me out, and Brian, you guys have been doing this for a while. Have we had a time in the past where we've had so many people to speak that we've said we're just not going to be able to get to everybody? I think our board presidents in the past have always gone out of their way to say, this might take till 9 o'clock, 10:30, whatever, but
10:30.
we're gonna hear from everybody.
You've opened up venues that are bigger to accommodate.
Yeah,
twice at least on my time on the board,
Yes.
where we've had more than 30 speakers, and one, I think we had 65.
The curriculum one?
Yeah.
I was over 60.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like fun, you guys?
I still wake up in the middle of the night, the cold sweat.
Yeah.
going, "Ah." No, it's good. It's a good opportunity to hear what people have to say, right?
Yes.
For sure. So, our board has always taken a different approach, and we're usually pretty good about the 3-minute thing as well. I've seen that go sideways, and other boards that I've been a part of, it's supposed to be 3 minutes, but, this person's really nice, or they have something good to say, or I feel bad, and they've just let some people go on too long.
Yeah.
And in this
Why
case, it
not
came at the expense of
5
other people,
minutes?
right? That's pretty rough.
Well,
So-
there's a huge difference between 3 minutes and 5 minutes.
That is true.
So to let that one speaker go on 5 minutes was just,
Right.
did not set the evening very well.
Right. Good. Any other thoughts around that one?
I just have two thoughts that
Yes.
weren't really brought out in there, but I think whenever you are responding based on fear, that you need to check yourself and figure out what's my motivation. And then I also felt like the leader of the meeting was focused on himself. In the middle of it, it says, you squirm a bit in your seat. Your mind focuses on the thought of running a smooth meeting. It's your responsibility, your fault. You have to do something. You remember the board policy. It's all focused on you instead of focused on the community or focused on what's best interest of the children or the students.
Those are great insights. Appreciate
It
that.
also brought more disorder when he
Yes.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
stopped it. So
He's trying to make things
he
go
didn't
well.
achieve his attempt to keep order.
Absolutely. A lot of emphasis in the last page or so, especially in the superintendent's lessons learned, about how important it is to be seeking public input. I agree that, I appreciate, I should say, we've had some robust conversation about what form that should take within our meetings, and then outside our meetings as well. From my perspective, I'll just share, I feel like you've landed on something that's pretty good in terms of, always hearing from people. We hear more now what the public has to say about our school district than ever in the past. Like literally every email or text or conversation you have seems to come up in, what'd you hear from the public? What's wrong with that? I mean, that's a pretty good thing. I feel like this board really goes out of their way to solicit public input and to then share it with each other and with the public. And that's a good thing. Really, there's a lot here about how important that is as a public servant to be doing that. So,
I like our use of the Google Forms right now to hear from the public, and they can address all of us at one time, and we can respond back to them as we
Right.
see fit. And I think that gives them a little bit more awareness that they can reach us any day they want,
great.
which we haven't had too many of those.
Right. Other thoughts or
That's okay,
comments?
it's
We're just
there.
about to our time limit. Great. Well, thanks, you guys. So next month, number 17 and 18, run your own district survey and argue with a hostile speaker. I can't wait.
Ooh.
Andy did all those in 1 year.
We've had a chance to experience a few of these, haven't we?
All right. Got less than a minute. I just want to make sure that the public can tune in properly. Oh, there we are. I'd like to call this PUSD Governing Board meeting to order for the 9th of September. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Shay, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thanks, Shay. Item 3A, consider approving the agenda. Everybody got a chance to look at the agenda? We'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Item 4A, consider approving the minutes from the study session, book study, and regular study and voting session meeting of August 5th, 2025. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Item 5A, summary of current events. Mr. Tenney.
Great, okay. Sarah, did we have a couple of slides here? Okay, very good. So one of the first things, most of you were able to attend our convocation. We often do that before the school year starts, but I think as Kelsey came up with the good idea of what if we did this a little later, and boy, we got a lot of real positive feedback about that from teachers who were getting their classrooms ready and others who had trainings and things that they were doing, and really appreciated that we did it as part of our first PD day. And there is a picture of our own Mrs. Robertson, and I think our keynote speaker, Mr. Bennett. Senator Bennett is there, and that was really nice. SFE had a nice spread for us at the beginning, and we had, 400 or so employees come, and a quick, nice way to kind of kick off the year together. It was great. We had about a dozen folks, Sarah, organizations that came and shared things with our teachers. Not just, hey, I'm trying to sell you this, but here's some services and things that we provide for you. Our insurance carrier, our benefits providers, ESI, which is the organization that people, if they're a substitute in our school district, they're actually directly employed with them. If somebody retires and wants to come back to the school district as a retiree, they go through ESI, et cetera. So the Chamber of Commerce, their share, and Yavapai College, et cetera. So it was quite nice. And thanks to Sarah for all of her organization there, and Kelsey for helping organize that morning. Brian didn't do a bad job at all. It was great.
What did I do?
Your cheers and whatnot
that was pretty
got things started off well. And the Education Foundation again came through with a donor. Desert Financial Credit Union donated gift cards to our folks who had reached milestones, right, in their time of service with PUSD. And who's the longest one, Andy?
We had Amy Chartier as our longest serving employee at 35 years. So we were able to go and visit her in the classroom the next week and kind of recognize her with her students as well. That was really cool.
Yeah. So Amanda's on year 36 with us, and she mentioned to us that she had 2 years prior to that in Humboldt. So she's been doing the teaching thing a good long time. I admire that. So it was pretty neat. And then the second part of that day was, not the second part, but 85% of that day was a really, really well-organized, planned, and run professional development day for our teachers that I think helped us hone our craft and learn some things that we need to know about. Kelsey, can you speak really quickly to the brain training that we got to do?
That sounds a little scary.
Yeah.
Yes. Right after convocation, we actually had all staff members stay at the high school, and we don't do this very often, but we had all of our K-12 staff received the same professional development on brain science. And how does memory work in order to retain information in the best possible way? And what teaching strategies can we start to align to that to get information from immediate memory to long-term memory? So it's all based off of the new classroom instruction that works from McCrell. That is what our teacher evaluation is based off of. That's our instructional model, so it fits in really nicely. We're going to be doing follow-up trainings around the phases of learning. Now we know how memory works. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
That was a big part of the day for nearly every one of our teaching staff, including our paraprofessionals and whatnot. So pretty cool. Thanks for that. Other couple of things that have gone on recently, this last, whatever it was, Wednesday through Friday, down in, we were in Phoenix, were we in Scottsdale, or Paradise Valley, someplace, right on the edge of something. At any rate, the ASBA Law Conference, and a couple of you were able to be there, and I think we got some good learning in together. Andy and Jane, I'd be interested if you have takeaways, questions, things, what are we doing about this, or I heard this, or whatnot. Please reach out to me. Let's find a time to talk about that and see if we can bring back what you learned for the benefit of the district. We certainly have already started to do that on the district admin team level, and we'll be doing that on the DLT level as well. Some of the takeaways. The first day was all about school safety, and the last couple of days were about various school law issues. And there were some new things and good reminders, and like almost every law conference, we all came away scared to death. So that was great.
That's what makes a good law conference.
Yeah, that's right. And then last couple things. Day after tomorrow is our 9/11 memorial recognition ceremonies at several of our schools. So if you've got time, I think we'll be talking about upcoming events soon. But if you've got time for that or have questions about what's happening when, we'll be be happy to talk with you afterwards about how you can participate in those. We'd love that. And then last thing I want to mention, a lot of us know the Mangrelli family well, and we're super sad, and our hearts go out to them, and hopefully your prayers with them. They've lost another one of their children in a tragic accident just in this last week. So we want to recognize that and let them know that we love them. And that's all I have.
Thanks. Item 5A2, governing board members. Brett?
Yes. So this last month, I had a chance to attend the candlelight vigil for Owen Smith, and I also attended his funeral, and just really impressed with the way the community rallied around that family and that situation and the students. It was neat. It was neat to see PUSD and our leadership there, and the PHS, our leadership there with the candlelight vigil, and it was just awesome. I mean, tragedy is hard, and when you have a community like we do, it's a blessing. And then I attended convocation. There was lots of good things that were said. Jane represented us well. A couple things that she said was that public schools are the bedrock of our community, and I love that she pointed out that we accept every child, and that's important to me as well. She also encouraged us to be brave, be bold, and be kind, which I loved. Mr. Bennett told the faculty and teachers, staff of the district to thank you, hang in there, and keep up the good work. And then Clark had a great concluding remarks where he reminded us that small changes and improvement make a huge difference, and reminded us of the aggregation of marginal gains and the power that can be in our lives. And that was a great message for me personally, and it was a great event. My first time ever going, and it was a very impressive group of people. The unity there, the kind of the buzz and the unity was fantastic. It was something that was neat for me to see for the first time. So thank you.
Nice. Jen?
I was able to go to the high school's Meet the Teacher night. It was very good. I actually found a room. I was telling you that night, I found a room I've never been in Prescott High School, which was pretty shocking.
Wow.
I didn't even know that area of the school existed, so I'm like, oh, Mason has a class here, okay. Sadly, so did Allie. Apparently I didn't go, which I later realized it was COVID years, so we didn't get to have those kind of nights, so I felt better about it after that. It's like, Allie had him, how did I not know? But it was very good, and I felt like all the teachers, it was a very hard day at PHS that day with the loss of Owen, and I felt like all the teachers just really showed up for the kids and the families that came. It was very, very impressive. I expected it to be different than that, and maybe even a lot of teachers missing, and I was really impressed with how many people stayed and talked to the families that were coming, so it was good. Otherwise, I missed convocation. I was gone for a couple of weeks, so I missed the whole last half of the month. So that's really the one thing I got to do before I left.
Andy?
So, Meet the Teacher night, as Jen said, was just really good. Again, same type of feedback I would have is just how engaged everybody was there, and on a really hard day, I was able to talk to some parents, and I think it went really well. It was very good. Convocation, kudos to everybody involved in planning that and putting it together. I think it's a great model for a school district to put on at the beginning. I don't know if other districts are doing this, but man, the energy and the enthusiasm was really excellent. So I was real happy for that. ASBA Law Conference, as Mr. Tenney said, was really, really good. There were a couple of things that I wasn't happy with, a couple of presentations. I think Mr. Neely and I could talk about that. I would like to speak to you, Clark, about an idea maybe of something we might want to take on.
Super.
As far as an advocacy thing that we could do. But the law conference was excellent, and as tired as you get listening to lawyers, and it does tire me out incredibly, I think that the value of what we learned was I just want to make a plug also for our upcoming Yavapai County meeting with ASBA on Thursday this coming week. If you can attend, that would be outstanding. You'll be at the Prescott High School Library starting at 4:30 with a meet and greet, and then the program will start at 5. And we'll have discussions about a lot of things that are upcoming, the capital funding lawsuit, other issues affecting school boards legislatively and practically. And then,
Is that the 11th or the 18th?
it's the 18th,
Okay.
sorry.
No,
Did I
it's
say
okay.
the 11th?
No, you just said this next week. I just want to
Oh,
make sure
yeah.
it's it.
Sorry, the
What week I
18th.
have. Okay,
The
perfect.
18th. And dinner will be provided too, so. And I did meet with Maya Caldwell, our director of ESS. I try to meet with her once a month, and this was our first time this school year, and just, while I know there is talk of declining enrollments in districts and somewhat in our district as well, special ed is not declining. So, and I think that's a standard across districts. So just so you know, our special ed numbers continue to increase, and there are a lot of out-of-district requests for services that we just cannot meet. We just don't have the staff to do that, which those are easy to deny. But when you have in-district students that are attending maybe a private school or a charter that doesn't provide the services that their student needs, those are resource intensive for us, and it creates a real burden on us. And the only way to handle that is to have better funding. But our staff is doing the best that they possibly can. Maya is working with YCESA to try to manage evaluations and screenings for eligibility, so hopefully they'll come up with a plan that will kind of take a county-wide consortium approach to this, hopefully. And she's also trying to work with private schools on how to serve these local kids that use our services but aren't enrolled. One of the things she brought up was we have traditionally provided transportation for those students to come get the services, and maybe that isn't what we should be doing, because it's not a requirement, it's not a mandate, apparently. So there are some things that we can do to try to take some of the resource-heavy side of this off of the district, and allow these parents of students at private schools that are legally entitled to these services to still take advantage of them. And I'll be doing future meetings with her and visiting other schools in the district to see some of the restructure that she's done, or that she's led with her team. And that's it for now.
Great.
Okay. My husband just texted me, Mike, that turn the TV coverage on, please.
That's what Sarah's working on.
Oh, that's what Sarah's working
Yeah,
on.
we had to
I think
fix
he might
something
be the
earlier and
only
has
one in
changed the
town
link,
that-
and Sarah's
that
Sarah's
watches
fixing the link
every-
online right now.
Every school board meeting he watches from
That's
AZ.
great.
Okay, I will tell him that.
So watch what you say.
I also went to the law conference with several of us that are here. I was a little apprehensive about going because I wasn't sure whether I would enjoy it, and I found myself enjoying it more than any other conference I've been to. I was fascinated with the way the laws are written and how we react and deal with the differences as they come up. Also, the convocation, this is kind of funny. My mantra always has been, be brave, be bold, be kind. And I thought that was me. Like, I made that up someday, and it was really cool, and I've lived my whole life that way. The next day, I went to the teacher's closet to put new supplies in. I had a stack of folders that said, be brave, be bold, be kind. So obviously, I didn't make that up.
Either that or you're a major trendsetter. That's a
I don't
possibility
know,
too.
so I didn't make that one. Back to school night at Abaya Judd, I don't know if we mentioned that last month or not, because I don't know about my dates, but wonderful to see all the kids back, everybody enjoying being back at school, seeing their friends, and that's pretty much it for me. Busy with the teacher's closet. At the beginning of the year, it's always takes a lot of time, but it's an enjoyable way to spend your time.
Well, I've just been a big slacker, so.
That's okay too?
Yeah, but, no, just, been at Lincoln, and, you know, obviously with the, our kids there, and, plan on going to the 9/11 ceremony here this Thursday. And then just, you know, last Saturday was soccer Saturday, right? So a lot of people out in the fields, a lot of kids, and just 3 different people approached me and just really appreciated the work that you're all doing on the board. And one of them is a special, well, there was a grandmother and a mother of a special ed student, and just really,
That's great.
just, they talked about how they're thriving, within PUSD. And then their oldest attends basis, so, just kind of neat that, each of their kids are getting what they need in their decisions. So, good to hear.
Great.
All right, community comments, Brett.
I had a couple this month. One of them, they're different. They're different community comments than normal. One of them was somebody asked me to go watch a video about school lunches in Japan. I thought maybe our superintendent might be able to give us some information on this. And she was certain that I would find the video that she watched, and I'm not sure I found it. I watched 3 videos on school lunches in Japan, and they seemed delicious. I was hungry after watching them. And then I had one person give me some advice on going into the classrooms more. As a school board member, that I had to be in the classrooms to see what the teachers are experiencing, and then I had another community member give me the exact opposite advice. Stay out of the classrooms. You don't belong there. It's none of your business. And so I'm still trying to figure out where my place is. I probably lean a little bit more towards needing to go into the classroom for my own education, my own benefit. So that's all. Those are the only community comments I had this month.
Awesome. What a spectrum.
And I'll just chime in real quick if I can. And I think Sarah's reached out to you, each of you, to set up a time where we can go and tour each of the schools that you're liaisons for, kind of get with the principal and have them tell us what they're most proud of, what their greatest needs are, and what we can do as part of the leadership governance team, I should say, to support them. And in addition to that, you are always welcome to just give the principal a heads up. Hey, we stopping by, and you're welcome in our classrooms all the time.
I did have, in response to a message I got from superintendent today, I did think that maybe we ought to send a message to the community about is that time to talk about this here?
Sure, yeah.
It's not agendized, but I think it requires some coordination in the public's, in front of the public. But I think we ought to have some communication from the board. I think that would be helpful, and I'm willing to write a rough draft. I just don't know how we, it would be great if it was from the board. I think all of us had all of our thoughts and maybe showed some unity with regard to the 4-day school week, and but I don't know how to do that and not violate open meeting laws. So if there's any
one thing that you could do, if other people have kind of give us that administrative direction, is they could ask that you write a draft, you send it to me, and I can send it to each of the folks then and get their input and meld that together, or give each of their individual pieces of input, then you could melt that together. Whatever. Yeah. If you get with more than one other, as you suggest, more than one other member directly about something offline, we're starting to wade into gray area as far as open meeting law, but I can facilitate that without a problem.
And the only thing I would say about that was I think there's a lot of anxiety out there right now. A lot of people seem to think this is a done deal, that we're starting next a year from now, and that they were not told about it. And we know all of that is a little bit of misinformation, but if you could just mention the fact that we understand some of you are anxious, and we're not going to do something like this without public input. And it was just a survey, just to see if there was any interest in the community.
People's thoughts are, and would it,
And I think it got,
logistically, could it be workable if you considered that in the future?
so I think it's just, we need to pay attention to their anxiety and how people hear things, life is like that. We hear things and we immediately think that's true, and we don't go any farther to do any more research. So in this case, I think a lot of people, it would be easing their minds a bit if we.
And do you think we ought to have a separate letter for employees of the district and then the community, or the same letter? Or I think there's different
Maybe we should do it as a topic. I just want this to
Yeah,
be
maybe we
a
should put it as
discussion.
an agenda topic.
Yeah, we'll have to bring that
Okay, agendize it and discuss how you want to
Yep.
go
Well,
about
why
it.
don't I work on a rough draft while we agendize it, and then we'll have a rough draft that we
Ready
can
to go.
talk about freely and say, I don't like this, I like this, and we can do it in the front of the public.
Yeah.
And
It's a good suggestion.
Or if you could respond to Superintendent Tenney, just on what you would each prefer, and then maybe we can get a better idea of where everybody is before we, because I don't want to vote on it, you know what I mean? And
Right,
right.
thanks, Brett, for
Yeah.
leaning forward. I just want to make sure everybody else is feeling the same way.
Okay.
I mean, you're a busy guy. Yeah. All right, Jen.
I didn't get a lot of feedback this month, other than I would have to say a lot of just friends and things, other parents in the community felt like it was a great start to a school year.
Great. Andy?
Really just kind of parent discussions that I've been able to have recently. One in particular, I saw a parent who's a friend of mine at Fry's, and we talked a little bit about the school board. And the thing that we have in common is just this belief in how great our graduates are. And so we both said, this really needs to get out there. And I mentioned that we're trying to do more of that, and that the foundation is helping us with that. But again, I think sharing the stories of our outstanding graduates and what they're doing after they leave Prescott are stories that need to be told. So that was the main thing that I took from that meeting with the parent, was just how we can better do that. I think the foundation is ideally set up to do that, and I hope they would take it on. It just seems to move pretty slowly. So, but that's the only thing I really have.
I didn't have much at all this month. Couple just parent interactions, but nothing that wasn't solvable with a little bit of common sense, and that's it. Oh, teacher, I would say more, as opposed to the general community, more teachers, because at the teacher's closet, which we've had a couple times since school started, it's just nice to look at it from a different role and see how teachers have started out well. It's been a good start for them. They seem to be really enthusiastic and very positive, and that's good to see. So I just see what the teacher comments are, which is fun to see, because they're good. They're excited. They want to be here.
I did have one parent reach out to me, and it was kind of cryptic on exactly what she was asking, but it had to deal with one of their children and a custody issue. But I wasn't sure what she was asking, but I know she was a parent from by a Judd. But the response after my initial response was Dr. Bray took care of it, and she felt like she was heard, and they came up with solutions. And then she left it with, we could meet anytime, but I'm not sure if we're going to be meeting or not yet. But I'll let you know next month if there's anything else further.
Okay.
That's how the conversation went. But anyway, that's all I got. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Item 6A. So are there any items that we want to highlight or pull?
That would be me. I would like to pull 6A2, approving the donations as presented so we can individually thank the donors.
Any other items? Okay. I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 6A2.
So
as
moved.
presented. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. All right. Jane, item 6A2.
All right, let's take a look at our donations from this past month. We have one from Front Stream, a donation in cash of $13.25 for Lincoln Elementary Administration. We have a donation from the First Congressional Church in the cash amount of $150 for outdoor education. We have a donation from Christine Bothell of cash in the amount of $1,000 for the PHS Hall of Fame. Adam's smiling back there. We have a donation from CMC Neptune of cash amount for $972 for, again, the high school athletics. We have a donation from Susan and Raymond Breeden in the amount of $1,000 for the Lincoln Elementary Food and Banquet. Not quite sure what that is. You might know what that is. And we have a donation from Susan and Raymond Breeden again in the amount of $972 for Lincoln Elementary Administration. And lastly, we have a donation from Steve Blair for $1,000 to go towards Discovery Gardens. And that's it.
Great.
And we appreciate you all.
Thank you.
We'll take a motion to approve item 6A2 in the consent agenda to consider approving the donations as presented.
I'll make that motion.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, item 6B, study and voting session. Do we have any call to public? No, we do not. All right, great. We'll move on to item 6B1. Consider approving Shay Moore and Jackson Kleiman to serve as student representatives of the PUSD Governing Board for the 2025-26 school year. Mr. Tenney.
Okay, great. So Mr. Neely and I had the opportunity to visit with a number of applicants. We've been doing this for, I don't even know, 20, 25 years maybe. We've had student representatives on our governing board, as you are aware. What a lot of people aren't aware of is that that's pretty unique. Not very many school districts do that. It's not written into statute anywhere. It's just something that our board decided to do years ago, and I think we can all agree it's been really, really valuable to have student perspective directly in real time about a number of things, plus just to see the great kids that we have in our schools. And we've talked before that they're not necessarily, the average kid that we get in here. They're kind of top flyers. Well, this year we had a number of top flyers, more than I can, help me out if I'm wrong, more than I can ever remember apply for kind of the two positions that we've settled on is useful. Great kids, all great kids. It was super hard for us to determine maybe these two would serve best, but we spent some good time talking with Jackson Kleiman and Shay Moore, in addition to several other candidates, and determined these two kids have something kind of special about them. We think that they would serve really well on our board this year. So we propose to you board members that you accept them as student representatives, non-voting, but with a lot to say and maybe impact the way that you see things and maybe the way that you'll vote about how we run our district based on some of their input. Questions?
I would just encourage you both to, don't be afraid to give us your perspective. Don't be shy. Just let it out when you
These
have
two
it-
aren't
when
shy,
you
let me
have-
just tell you
good.
that.
When you have an opinion, it's really important that we know what you're thinking.
Anybody? Yeah. Well, welcome. You'll have a spot on the agenda next month, and we obviously want to hear from you and what's going on in the community as well as the school. So anything you would like to present. Yeah, obviously high caliber individuals, and really appreciate you being on this with us. You'll find that we like to have interaction, and again, we'd like to, anytime that you have a question, feel free. You are a member of this body as well. So appreciate you being here. And, well, hang on, let's vote first before we move on.
Yeah, we got to vote.
I'll take a motion to consider approving Shay Moore and Jackson Kleiman to serve as student representatives on the PUSD Governing Board for the 2025-26 school year.
I'll make that motion.
Motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. All right.
Unanimous, that's fantastic.
So Jackson and Shay.
Oh,
have
nice.
actually nameplates.
Your nameplates. It's
And
official.
if you look carefully, the letters on your plaques are actually slightly larger than the letters on the governing board members' plaques. I don't know if that's intentional, if there's a meaning behind that, but it's a thing, so.
Well, welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome. That's exciting.
We can have you
We've missed
officially
having
participate from
students.
this point forward. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions, but I think, in fact, do you want to have them say something real quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to just share with us, what was
Put
your
you on the
interest, and
spot.
then a little bit about you?
So I learned about it because that this was like a position because my sister did it 2 years ago, Ava Kleinman.
Yeah.
And she and I just have very different views. So I just thought it would be cool to bring my perspective because I really value my education and I've had a lot of opportunities to further it. So if I could be like a voice to help other students get that, that's kind of what attracted me to interviewing for this. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackson.
Honestly, I almost didn't apply for this position. I was really worried, like, I wasn't going to get it. I'm like, why am I going to apply in the first place. And then my friend talked me into it just because I really appreciate leadership. I went to Hobie a couple years ago. If you don't know what that is, it's this youth leadership program that the high school set up. I was nominated by Miss Cherry, who no longer works there, sadly, and I got to go, and it was an awesome opportunity. And honestly, that just really inspired me to apply for this position. I've lived in Prescott my whole life, and I really just like appreciate the town, and I want to put my input in. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Welcome again.
They were both outstanding in their interviews. Just, I mean, we'll probably learn more about activities they've been involved in their academic record and whatnot other months as things come up. But in addition to that, and that was the case almost for everybody, right? We didn't look at any student's kind of resume, so to speak, or letter of interest and say, what the heck, at all. They were like, whoa, 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 one after another. But these two just really kind of rose above an outstanding group of applicants in terms of the way that they came off in the interviews. And we thought, that's something we need added to our board this year.
Wonderful. All right, moving on to item 6B2, consider approving the international travel request from Ms. Catherine Hammer, teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS students to Japan over spring break and watch lunch videos.
Maybe they'll experience real lunch. It's possible. We don't even know. But before I dig into this, can I just tell you guys how proud I am as the principal of Prescott High School to have Shay and Jackson involved, and thank you for accepting them. They are going to do wonderful things, and I'm just really excited to have them here. And the way that they represent Prescott High School is something to be exceptionally proud of. So, proud of the both of you. Awesome. So yeah, we are talking about another one of those amazing trips for our kids. This time, we're already looking at 2027 and a trip to Japan. The biggest thing I would tell you is that none of this has been finalized on how many kids. You know, they're still in the recruiting process of figuring that out. But they're looking at somewhere between 15 and 70 students and one chaperone per every 6 students who travel. So, and then this would be happening over spring break in March 2027. You guys have any further questions for me? I always do my best with these.
I was looking at the expenses, and for each kiddo, it's about close to $5,300. But I also noticed that the lunches were not included in that. Well, you know, that's an important thing.
Well, we went
So
full circle there, didn't we? Yeah.
So I was just curious about how much money do we expect the students to bring up their own? Any idea? Just.
You know, I don't know for
Yeah.
sure, but I would tell you that I have heard that when these students are able to do some of the fundraising pieces and things that knock down that price, they feel like they're getting this trip at a really nice rate in the long run. We've rarely had any students who didn't come back thinking that they
So
just
they'll
got
get
so
lunch.
much out of it. So I don't know if they're being fed or if they have to have their own money included. But oh, never mind. I think Mr. Tenney knows all about Japanese lunch. Sorry, that's my last one. I apologize. I'll stop.
I do. I actually led the very itinerary. They're doing 2 times as a teacher myself at Prescott High School, in addition to another trip to Japan. So, and the way that EF Tours works is, that they stay in hotels that provide breakfast, and it's usually a pretty hearty breakfast, and then they provide dinner at a restaurant or some other similar place in the evenings, and the kids are on their own for lunch. Some kids, bring a bunch of energy bars with them and do that. Some of them say, oh my gosh, they have McDonald's in Japan, super, what is that? That kind of thing. So, it's up to each kid what they do, but you can get a reasonable amount of food at lunch for a nominal amount of money in most places, including Japan.
The
Pretty
video
expensive place.
today said
Oh,
that
yes.
lunch costs $2, and current exchange rate is at 294 yen. So I think they'll be okay.
That wouldn't be atypical in a school at all. That would be pretty atypical out, from a street vendor or a McDonald's or, something like that. But a little bit more than that, but not a lot more. So there's no reason a student should have to go without. So yeah, lunch is not provided on these, but they do it themselves. The other thing they're asked to bring is if they want to buy souvenirs, money for that.
Right.
And then there's a certain amount of money for a tip for their tour guide at the end that's sort of expected in addition to the overall fee. But Adam's right, $5,300 for, I think, what are they doing, 7 or 9 days in Japan is a steal. That's pretty good.
The kids also have quite a bit of time to pay for it. Mason's going to Spain in May
Oh, there
with
you go.
EF Tours, and you pay throughout the year. Like,
Yeah.
it's quite a while that
Yeah.
families have to pay
$160
that off
a
over
month or
time.
something,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
like they have to come up with that right away when they sign up. They then are put on a payment plan for the rest of the year until they go. So it's almost a full year that you have to pay it. So
Yeah, and
it makes it much more manageable for families.
I think so too, and I would just say that the demand and interest tells me that it is well worth the time and effort to make it happen and the cost, so.
They're doing a much better student to chaperone ratio than I ever did, I'll just tell you that. We're flying by the seat of our pants.
When was the last time we went to Japan? Is this
So
regular?
that's a good one. I actually had to ask that question. I think, what's that? It was, what's that? I think it was 5 or 6 years ago was the answer I got as well. So it was, yeah, it has happened, but it's been a little bit since the group went. And so they were looking for another way because, again, the demand and interest in a Japan trip sounded like it was very high. So.
That's very cool.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to be sure. There's not any exchange type thing with a Japanese school. So our students
No.
are not visiting schools in Japan.
No, this one is clearly a tour. Unlike the Sister City Germany thing that
Yeah.
happens yearly, that is the only thing that we have that is truly like an exchange.
Yeah.
These EF tours are trips to experience the
Okay.
culture and travel through.
And the board has asked questions about, safety. Hey, you're going to Spain, what does that look like? Is it safe? I don't know, et cetera. And those are legitimate questions always. I can tell you that they're going to be much safer in Japan than they are in Prescott in terms of crime rates and property crime and whatnot. We had kids on our trip who, they left a camera on the train, got it back later that day. We've had people drop cash, got it back later that day. It's a big part of their society to just treat other people with respect and kindness. Yeah.
This trip is also very beneficial. All the school trips that they go on are very beneficial. My friend just went to Rome in the past trip that they did, and she had an awesome time. She never would have been able to go without the school. So they're very beneficial to exploring the world and seeing other cultures.
All right. So we'll take a motion to approve the international travel request from Miss Catherine Hammer, teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS students to Japan over spring break 2027.
I'll make that motion.
Motion, do we have a second?
I will second it.
Motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, thanks Adam.
Thank you.
Item 6B3, consider approving an IGA between the Arizona Department of Education and PUSD for Project Momentum AZ support. Kelsey.
Yes, so this IGA is with Project Momentum. That is through Arizona ADE School Accountability Department. So this is for any school who receive less than a C letter grade. So this is really an agreement with Mile High Middle School and Project Momentum to be able to work together based off of their letter grade from last school year. The good news that I have to share with you is we've made substantial improvement based on all of the things that have been implemented at Mile High from when they were a D school. So we anticipate them being higher than that in this upcoming year. We'll have more information to share with you on that soon. The timing for Project Momentum is very off. I think that's the best way I can say it. So we've had a whole school year pass of us making improvements. However, this summer we were notified that Mile High would have to work with Project Momentum this upcoming year because of that school accountability component. So I've been working with Ashley Tetro over at Mile High and her principal coach partner. But what this IGA is for is to allow Mile High to take advantage of some funding to provide some professional development for their staff. So it's $7,000 worth of funding. One of the other components is that Ashley is working with their principal partner on specific goals. The great news is, we really are ahead of the game. There was a lot of improvement and changes made last year, both to instruction, culture, environment, that already address some of the things that Project Momentum is going to address. So we feel like we're in a good spot, and now it's just going to be continuing to fine-tune with that principal partner. There is a potential. There's not a lot of detail from the state on this part of the IGA yet, but the students at Mile High might have to take an ELA and a math benchmark assessment. So one of those would be one grade level, one would be the other, so it wouldn't be every student for both assessments. but we don't have more information than that currently. So right now, just approving this IGA allows Mile High to take advantage of the $7,000 funding to offer some professional development in an area that they choose to help them continue to meet their goals.
Okay, so I think you just answered my question, because you said professional development.
Correct.
So the $7,000 is going to go for professional
Yes.
development for math and language teachers to improve scores, probably.
Yeah, and the nice part is they can send them to training, or they can bring trainers in, and they can train everybody. So they're going to really be able to fine tune those areas of growth for them. They're not starting from scratch. So they'll get to hopefully choose some instructional strategies that they're focusing on.
So is this Project Momentum mandatory or punitive, or is it, I don't understand how that, and then they give us money to go along with it?
Yes.
All of the above, baby.
Yes, all of the above. So it is mandatory from the state because Mile High received a D letter grade a year ago this time.
Based on the previous school year, so to be
Correct.
clear,
So
2
it was
years
2
ago.
years.
2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So timing doesn't feel great just because, a whole school year has gone by. If this was last year at this time, I would think it would feel differently.
Right.
So I think that would be the only reason it feels maybe a little punitive, but it's not. We're taking it as we're just going to continue to grow and learn, and we have somebody from the outside who has worked in some larger districts in Arizona, and she can provide some insight and some guidance in a way that we don't get on the day-to-day.
Is it a new program? Or have they been doing this with schools scoring D scores
Good question.
in the past?
So Project Momentum is not a new program. Actually, Humboldt, their entire district has been with them for a couple of years now. Part of that was optional. Part of that was because it was a great funding opportunity. Funding has changed a little bit with that. Arizona currently now this is their model for school accountability. So any schools with a D or an F.
So Humboldt had a couple of schools in that
Right.
category.
Yeah.
They were eligible for it district-wide, and like Kelsey says, there's a lot different funding mechanism before. They got over $1 million to work on things. So this
We're not getting that
description in the relevant information where it says, to fund teachers and professional development,
what I was
whatnot. Andy, your HR, how many teachers can we get with $7,000? Remind me.
0.0.
Okay, so, yeah, all these things that they say, hey, you can do all this stuff, it's not quite that. But $7,000 is nothing to sneeze at. We could maybe get some decent training out of that, like Kelsey says, for sure. And
then
the timing is just weird. I think we've shared with the board offline, we can share publicly what, we got our scores, the numerical scores that will translate into a letter grade once the State Board of Education sets those, the cut scores essentially for this next year. It's been the same year after year for the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
We anticipate that'll be the case again. And if that's the case again, will you share with us, Kelsey, what grade we anticipate Mile High will be?
I don't know if
for
we're
this
allowed to
year?
share those yet.
We can share what
Publicly?
we anticipate, yeah.
Well, we anticipate Mile High to be a B, and they're a very solid B.
Yeah,
So.
like well into the B range. So truly, is there a good reason for the state to be coming in with this timing to do this? Probably not. Could we make lemonade out of it? Yeah, we probably can. That's what we're going to do.
So when you go on the Department of Ed website and you look up the Project Momentum Arizona, it's a little wishy-washy as far as exactly what specifics you're going to do. So I'm assuming that as a district, we have a choice of what kind of professional development we feel would work best for our teachers.
Yes.
So it's up to us. It's in our, okay, ballpark.
Yeah,
Good.
and this does look different for PUSD than it does, say, for Humboldt, who's a part of Project Momentum. Again, they're in a multi-year process. This is a one-year process. So even within Project Momentum, that looks different from what they're used to. They're used to coming in and sustaining that support for multiple years, and that's not the case here. So we just have a one-year requirement. Because of that D letter grade, we know that that's not going to be the case again, so they will be off that school improvement cycle after next year, which is why we got less funding, but also why it's going to look a little bit different. And I think ADE's got some work to do to fine-tune all of the expectations, because it's still not entirely clear. This is a new partnership for ADE, or newer, I should say.
What are some of the things that they have implemented to try to turn the letter grade
question.
around?
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So Project Momentum is geared around. The framework is around 6 gears. And so you've heard us talk a lot about professional learning communities. There's 4 essential questions within professional learning communities. Those 4 are the core gears for Project Momentum, which is why a lot of the things that we're doing fall right in line with Project Momentum already, because we've been implementing professional learning communities. So it is, what do we want students to know? How would we know that they're going to learn it? What instructional strategies are we going to use to help provide instruction? What are we going to do if students don't get it? What are we going to do if they do get it? And how are we going to continue that momentum? So those are the 6 questions it really centers around. Those are their gears.
And are there practical things that Mile High has done over the last 2 years? I mean, we kind of mentioned that their points that they got from the state for letter grade a couple of years ago were not great, and the points this year were great.
Yeah.
So what's led them to that? You kind of alluded to that, but are there structural things in terms of like their schedule or training for teachers or other pieces?
There's a lot of components, and a lot of them, I mean, most districts who start with Project Momentum are not in the place that we are, because we took so much initiative last year. So last year, Mile High did adjust their schedule entirely. So they created longer class periods so that they could have more time for instruction. They really focused on that PLC model where teachers were meeting regularly to collaborate, to look at data. We also implemented those common formative assessments on essential standards. And then they're looking at data from those formatives in order to inform future instruction. So that's what teachers are working on those Friday afternoons. A lot of districts who start with Project Momentum don't have formative assessments in place. They don't have that collaboration schedule already happening. Some of them have to really start from the ground up and rebuild. So we're in a better spot. So we're really looking at fine-tuning the processes that we put into place last year.
Any other questions? All right. We'll take a motion to consider approving an IGA between the Arizona Department of Education and PUSD for Project Momentum AZ support.
So moved.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thanks, Kelsey. Item 6C, information discussion items. Brian Moore, Chief Financial Officer, has prepared the school board summary budget report for your review. Mr. Moore?
In comparison to last month, not much has changed, so as presented, just the numbers.
Any questions for Mr. Moore? There. Item 6C2, ASBA and the Trust Model Policy Program discussion. Andy?
All right, this one here, I'm assuming. All right, good evening. I get to talk about the wonderful world of policies and our model policy program. Just to remind everyone, last spring we came to the board with some suggestions. We kind of looked at the trust model policy and said, you know, we're seeing some things in this this program that we like and we think we may want to consider. The board said, let's get some more information. We had both ASBA, our current policy program, and the trust come together, provide all sorts of information. And then a couple months ago we said, again, what are we thinking? And there were still some questions around that, and the board asked us to dig in a little bit more, ask some questions from kind of the real perspective of how it looks at the district level. And so that's what we've done the last month or so. And when I say we, it's kind of everyone up here. We all took various components of it. We reached out to some other districts and got some information together. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. So with that being said, is it working? Maybe not.
Sarah will click for you.
Okay. Doesn't seem to be. All right. Nope. Okay. So we've looked at both the ASBA program and the trust model policies, and you know, we've talked about it several times. We've kind of revisited, making sure that we still feel this way. And right now, the district administration is recommending that we make a change to the trust model policy. But we want to explain why that is. With that being said, I want to be real clear that That doesn't mean we want to break ties with ASBA altogether. We have a great partnership with ASBA. We just, as many of you mentioned, we just went to a conference put on by ASBA, and it's been a great partnership. We want to continue that partnership. But the model policy specifically is the part where we're looking at making a change. Wanted to have you consider a few different pieces here. So, want to go to the next one? I want to just review why we have this model policy service in the first place. I think a lot of you have seen these advisories come through every few months and have an idea, but I want to revisit that. The next one, we did reach out to several other districts who've gone through this process and got some feedback from them, so we'll share that. Obviously, cost is a component. We do pay for this service, so we'll look at that. Site navigation is a big component that both from administration standpoint, from an employee standpoint, from the board standpoint, so we want to make sure we're looking at all of those components. Obviously, we want to look at the policies themselves, how they're organized, the content of them. And I think there's one more, and if the board decides to move forward with this, what that transition process would look like. So starting with why do we have this policy service in the first place? There's a few up here that kind of sound similar, but as you really dig in, they are pretty different. I'll say expert guidance, the idea that we don't have lawyers on staff that can be dedicated to looking at not just laws, but all the different changes that are happening. So whether it's a legal change or just a policy that we have in place already that we want to say, what is this really saying? Or how does this apply to this unique situation that we're facing? So having experts that we can reach out to and provide us guidance on that. Up-to-date policies, as I mentioned, laws are always changing. We want to be able to have legal experts who can be monitoring what the legislature is doing or what the federal government is doing, so they can look at our current policies, craft new ones if necessary, provide that to us in a timely manner. Risk reduction, again, I'm sure you know, many of our policies aren't based just on the law itself. Some of them are just based on what's going to help keep us out of trouble, what is going to, what's best practice, what's best for kids. So having people that can be looking at those things and helping us reduce those risks is a huge advantage of having a policy like this. Efficiency, again, we have people that are experts in a lot of areas, but having somebody that can provide this to us in a timely manner is much better use of our time than having, like I said, having us dig into it. Connection. What I mean by that is it helps connect us to other districts. Other districts are often going through very similar issues, and having partnerships with those other districts who have a similar policy, we can borrow from their ideas. We can the trust can also bring those together, so we can learn from their policies. And the last one I have here, service, not mandates. They're a partner. They're here to provide us a service. They're not saying, here's a policy that you must do, take it or leave it, right? The good news about this is the trust provides this, but so does ASBA. We've been very pleased. ASBA has done a great job with these things as well. It's not that we are unhappy with the service that we've been provided, but again, when we looked at both of these policies, or not policies, both of these programs side by side, overall we felt that the trust might be a better fit for us. But again, overall, ASBA also provides all 6 of these items. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So as I mentioned, we did start by reaching out to other districts. We wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of jumping into something that doesn't have kind of a proven track record. Right now, there are 47 other districts in Arizona that are using the trust for their policy advisory. There's large ones, as you can see here. Mesa and Chandler, I believe, are the 2 largest districts in the state. I think Gilbert's like number 5 or something. There's medium-sized districts, and there's also several really small districts. So this applies to really districts of all sizes. We did reach out, like I said, got some feedback from other districts on kind of their experience. And I'm not going to read all of these. You want to just kind of list or click through several examples here. I know you all can read. But, thank you, Sarah, who was the one who reached out and was communicating the most with some of these districts. But one that I do want to point out is that second bullet there, that idea that our current district council, our district lawyer is part of the trust, and clearly when they are also involved in some of the creation of these policies, they're going to have a much deeper understanding of it. They're going to be able to refer to it much easier and kind of see the nuances of them. I think Clark or Mr. Tenney mentioned a couple presentations ago that when we first started looking into this, we were looking at a policy around staff-student boundaries and reached out to our attorney, and he was pointing this. We had no idea that he was the one that helped create that policy. He wasn't pushing for us to move in this direction by any means, but provided that this was an example. So, but having that expertise certainly helps. But as you can see from some of these comments, overwhelmingly the comments from these other districts were very positive.
Andy, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you sought comments from districts that have remained with ASBA?
I don't know if you can share any that you heard that said no, that we're not going through. So I don't believe we had any that. Okay. That you mean started that process and then decided no, we were going to stay with that ASBA.
So I mean, I know what the districts that are staying with the trust are going to say.
Right.
But it would be good to hear what some of the counter arguments might be.
It's good to know who's been doing that research.
Yeah.
If they didn't make the switch.
Yeah.
Do we know of any, that's a good
Yeah,
question.
I'm not
Do we
sure
know of
which
any
ones.
districts who have looked at whether or not to make a switch and decided not to? I know
I'm not aware of
several
any.
that have looked at it and said, yeah, this other bit.
Right.
Maybe I can ask another question that's
Please.
not related, but just for information of everybody here. We know what ASBA is, right? It's the Arizona School Boards Association, and this is one of the subscription services that we've been using.
Correct.
The trust, remind us what that is. There's like a full name for that, and what do they do, and whatnot.
Yeah, the trust is the Arizona, what is it, liability.
Arizona Schools Risk and Retention
Risk
Trust, is that
retention.
what it is?
So yes, thank you. So yeah, their primary purpose is, of course, risk retention and reduction. We want to make sure that that's, again, using our attorneys, that's their goal, is to make sure that our policies, our procedures, our practices are covered by making sure we're not doing anything we shouldn't do that get us into
They're
trouble.
the main liability insurance provider for school districts
Correct.
across Arizona.
Yes.
Not
Yeah,
every district, but nearly every district.
Nearly every
right?
district,
Works with
correct. Other questions? Yeah. Okay. So when we started looking into this, the cost difference was significant. We were seeing that $500 versus almost $5,000, and that jumped out at us. But wow, this could be a huge savings. It also raised some questions to kind of say, well, why such the big difference? Are we not getting the service that we would expect? So in the process, reaching out to the trust, we asked them about the cost, and they did share that their expectation or their plan right now is to be increasing the cost over the next several years, partly for that reason of making sure that they are staying up to date and have enough staff on hand that can respond to the growing membership. But overall, you can see the breakdown of where it is, and even with that increase, it's still a significant savings. We realize that the difference here is not going to make or break the district, so this shouldn't be the final determining factor, but it is still a significant amount that we wanted to point out. Any questions on the cost?
Have they mentioned anything about the year 4 plus? Like in the email, it said in year 4 it will be this much. Is that a commitment to stay at that level, or?
When I spoke, Lillian is one of the main ones here. She said they're planning to cap it at that 3,500.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think we've got a guarantee from either the trust or
Right.
ASBA that 10 years from now, they
Right.
won't charge more than they currently do, but what they've told us verbally is 4 years from now and 5 years from now and 6 years from now, you'll be paying for that. We don't have that information from ASBA. It could go up.
Right.
Right.
Do we expect an increase when our current agreement ends in July from ASBA?
From ASBA, have we gotten anything from ASBA? Not
not
aware of
mentioned
anything.
anything.
They
I
have
don't
not
think
shared
it's
any.
Okay.
It's certainly possible, but they've not mentioned anything we haven't asked about.
And I'll look to see what
The
the
increase.
increase from year to year was, and when I see
Yeah.
it, I'll let you know.
All right. So one of the things, hopefully you all had a chance to play on it a little bit and experience the differences between the ASBA policy, navigation, and the trust. I'll start with just a few comments again. If kind of both of the comments speak to the same thing, is that they felt that the site navigation was much easier. And the second comment here, the platform is so much more user-friendly for updates and navigation. I want to kind of distinguish between, obviously navigation, whether you're an employee who wants to jump on and look up what the policy is for something, or administration who wants to review that, board members. Updates, on the other hand, is typically would be Sarah. As changes come up, the board maybe votes on a change, and it goes back to Sarah to make that update. We're going to talk about what that looks like, the differences, in I think the next slide. I was going to kind of click through the two examples here, so maybe we can do that. Has anyone had a chance to look at the two examples? I'm sure you're familiar with the ASBA policy bridge. Have anybody had a chance to look through the trust portal? I see a few nods. Okay. So, Sarah, if you want to click on, let's start with just the policy bridge. Hopefully this is somewhat familiar to you, but again, we have the list of all the different districts that are currently using the ASBA policies. Having to scroll through and find our district first. It's in there somewhere. A lot of P's, yeah. And then it breaks it down for the various sections. And then if you open those up, there you go. Then obviously it breaks it up and brings up whatever policy it is. You can see there's quite a few. It provides both the coding that I know not everybody loves the lettering that is used in this, but that is kind of how they do that. If you're familiar with the policies that you're looking for, you can kind of scroll through until you find it. There is a search down. Oh, there's that one too. Yeah, advanced search. And you can enter keywords and phrases into that. And one of the things that we'll note here, it does pop up kind of the title of the policy, and you'll see in the trust it looks a little bit different. But that's kind of navigation. Printing from this, printing and saving is a little bit difficult, but I think most people have kind of figured out how to work
Gotta be
around that
careful.
and get to.
If Sarah hit print right now and then said yes, the entire policy manual
Yes.
would print, because the checks are on that.
Yeah, so you got to be real careful on that.
We've had people make that mistake in the past. Went to the printer and
I've had.
just print that. That's what I was looking at.
Sometimes if you're wanting to share a policy, like a link to it, can be difficult as well. I've had times wanted to share with an employee saying, here's the policy, and you have to kind of download it in PDF and then share that, and rather than share a link directly. So,
Andy, am I remembering, though, that at our law conference, actually, there was a couple of comments made by ASBA folks over this, saying that they've heard some feedback about some of the things that are glitchy and clunky about this, and they've already made some changes and are planning to make some more changes.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that several factors, not just on the portal itself, but that they're trying to take some feedback and make adjustments, because I think they've heard some of this similar feedback.
They've been responsive to that. They recognize
They're
there's
actually
a difference.
rewriting the whole thing.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Okay.
it's in sections. There's a lot of sections.
Well, that as well, in
they're
terms of the
rewriting.
content, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's talking about the navigation pieces that
Oh,
went up, and both,
For
I
all of
think there's
those, for
improvements.
ease of use as well
Yeah,
as content.
absolutely.
Right. So moving to the trust portal now.
And Andy, we're, because we don't use the trust program, Prescott Unified isn't in here, so it's going to pull all policies from the 47 districts that are included in this program, all of their policies.
You know, one of the things I liked at times with the ASBA policies is to say, oh, here's all the different districts that are using this, and I can look at other districts, see what their policies are. Are they the same? Are they different? If you, that option is available here as well. If you clicked on the little down arrow next to where you wrote minutes, it shows all the different
Oh, okay. I did
districts
not
that are available, so you can also search by the other districts.
Do you know, is there a way to access, so if you wanted to look at a district that is not part of the trust, how do we access their policy to see if it's similar?
That is not part of the trust.
Right.
Would they be part of the ASBA then?
Yeah, so if they're part of ASBA and we're no longer utilizing
do
ASBA's
we still
policy
have that
services,
ability?
can we still get to their policies
This
to
is
view them?
public. This isn't.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
That's
isn't there a
public.
public
Yeah.
aspect of it?
Right.
Okay.
And
Yes.
we can,
Okay.
anybody can see it.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
That's a good question.
And then the trust.
Because
a
we don't
helpful
log
thing
into
sometimes.
it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
good question, is the
Is the
trust then
trust public?
public?
Did you catch the other question? Is the trust also public?
the trust
Can
also
anybody look
public?
right now?
I don't
if
believe
they
so.
haven't subscribed?
I believe you have to be a subscriber to be able to access
Now, we
those
would-
policies.
That's something we'd want to clarify with them.
Yes,
We want
please.
this available to all of our staff, all of our parents, all of our stakeholders as well. So
Yeah.
I'm confident there's a
There's a
mechanism
way
for
for them
that.
to see it.
So we'll just need to find out what that is.
Good question. So you can see just the layout broken down kind of by chapters. Looks like we're in the
Right.
chapter
I
one
don't
about
think-
district governments. Go ahead.
That's not the way the screen looked originally.
I don't think I had to log in when I went in to look at it, and Brett just got in it, and he didn't have to log in.
Okay,
So it
maybe
must be
not
public.
then. Maybe I was thinking we had to. So as you click through, in my opinion, it's a little easier to just see the different, both the chapters and then the individual breakouts in each of those chapters. I've been going obviously to chapter 4 quite a bit and see the various
There you go. That's
breakout.
what I like right
So you can see they kind of break out each category, give kind of subcategories within that. And so just the site layout I found to be much easier to navigate. It sounds like that's what some of the other districts have shared as well, but we'll dig into a few of those as well. Again, this is more of a content issue, but I feel like the titles are a little more clear and easier to identify what policy you're actually looking for. Let's see. Okay, let's go back. Policy updates?
Can I just ask one more thing on their
Absolutely.
site? Again, both of them have hyperlinks to legislation and all of the things that, where we can find the law that's written for that particular, like, when you
Yep,
send
they-
us an update on ASBA, I know it always has the link, and I will click and go look at the law that's
To see-
associated.
Right. Yeah, this is, it's really similar. Underneath the policy itself, it references which
I figured as much, I
regulation.
just wanted
Yep.
to make sure we had the same.
Is it all the same policies, like, per each district that actually participates in the trust? Because on the other thing that you were showing us, it seems like they're all district-specific.
It's a great question. It's a little bit of both. And so as you click through really with both ASBA and the trust, you'll find, so like for
Sorry, I'm getting to this right here.
Copyrighted.
there'll be some policies that have the copyright there, and that means the ASBA provided that policy and we adopted it just word for word. We're always able to make changes if we'd like. And so many of our policies are that copyrighted policies. They're exactly the same as other districts. And then, but some of them are not. And some of them we say, we want to add this or we want to take this out. And in those cases, our policy would look different. That's the same process for the trust program as well. So some will be copyrighted and some will be more individualized.
You can probably see, Shay, if the text is big enough for you, the vast majority are ones that we share the same policy with nearly every other district in Arizona who is subscribed to ASPA. There's a handful, especially around like our benefits, time off for teachers, stuff like that. Every district does that a little bit differently, and we've taken their model policy, and our board has said, well, that's great, but we want to do it this way. So there's some of these, but like Mr. Binder was saying, 80, probably 90+% of the policies are same that, Humboldt does, and the same as Chino Valley does, the same as Dysart does.
So there's that. That's
So-
copyright again. Yeah.
Do the programs just send out one big policy and then each district makes changes to it, or do they say, here's a good guideline, and then build off of it based on the district?
So what they do is they will have, for each of these categories, they'll have a set of policies that they say, here's what we feel is a good baseline, and you can adopt it exactly as is. You can make it or make adjustments. Some of the policies we have to make some adjustments because it's based on very specific district kind of practices. But they will provide all of them, and then as adjustments go forward, if a law changes, they'll say, hey, a new law has come up, we're going to adjust this one policy, here's a new version of that. And then you'll see throughout the year, what we'll be doing is we'll be bringing some of those adjustments to the board. The board will look it over, can accept it as presented, make adjustments to it, and then we'll vote on that to make it more our own. Okay, questions? So again, I don't want to spend too long on it, but the navigation of the site itself. The other piece I did want to mention was the kind of the updates. I mentioned it a little bit before. Let's see here. Oh, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So I think one of the questions that was asked earlier was, what do those updates look like? And so you've seen the ones from ASBA before. Actually, I'm going to go back to this. Overall, the trust updates are pretty similar. They're really not that different. They're updated approximately quarterly or as needed if something comes up, again, at the state or federal level. But overall, the format, very similar. Again, it starts with kind of an introduction where the change is coming from. It gives a little description of the actual law that's or other changes that might be changing, a little summary of what the policy change is, and then it gets into the actual policies that, just like with ASBA, there's areas that might have a strike through. There might be the new sections that are underlined. Let's see, this one doesn't look like. Here's an example, right? They make a few little edits, but again, overall, very similar to what ASBA has provided, and you're all pretty familiar with. One big difference, though, is the process itself of what is asked of Sarah. And so with ASBA, when a policy change needed to take place, she shared with me today, 2-3 pages of instructions on how she needs to log in and what she needs to click here and to make all these edits and changes. And when she reached out to the trust and said, hey, do you have a similar guideline on what the instructions look like? Their response was, just send it to us and we do it for you. And so it's a much simpler, easier process to update. So if there's a policy change, and whether it's from the trust itself or just one we decide on our own that we want to implement, we send it to them and tell them what needs to be done, and it gets inputted. So that part itself is an easier process.
Are you saying that, so the big discussion we had, in, was it January, February, about changing policy, and we took a couple of months to decide on that public comment policy.
Yeah.
So we would say this is what we want. You write it for us to the trust, and they would send something back, or are we doing the wordsmithing like we were in that session?
We would have the option to wordsmith it ourselves.
Okay.
what I mean by updating, I mean the inputting into the system.
Show up on the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
There's a
It's a
12-step process
Okay.
that Sarah
Okay.
goes through.
Okay.
We ask the trust, can you give us the instructions for the 12-step process? And if there isn't, we do it for you.
okay.
Yeah.
We would send them the edits, any additions, things
Okay.
like that, and then they would do it for us. And once,
And
obviously
post it.
approved by the board, then
Right.
they would post it to the
Okay.
trust.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah, so. So hopefully you had a chance, Sarah shared with you a breakdown of several kind of glitching on me here. Are we fighting each other out with the mouse?
Are you trying to click on the document?
No, I was just clicking through the slideshow.
Oh, here.
Okay, I'll let you do it. Yep. Okay. So we had.
Don't fight with Andy.
We each kind of took an area and looked through it. They provide a crosswalk that kind of shows what ASBA policies are, what trust policies are, just to kind of give us an idea of where the similarities are. I took the one around staff code of conduct. Clark looked at the student code of conduct. Brian, budgeting, and Sarah looked at the governing board meeting and open meeting law. And went through it. We found, kind of our general thoughts about what the similarities and differences were. As you can imagine, there's lots and lots of policies. There's lots, when you're comparing both of them, there's twice as many. And so we actually used AI and just kind of tried to get a summary based on what it shared. And that's partly what you have in that document.
Shay and Jackson, old people using AI, pretty sweet.
It was very interesting to see kind of its feedback that it provided. Overall, though, we wanted to, that was one kind of perspective. What we did, though, is we said, okay, now looking at the differences from these, what are our big takeaways? What are we really feeling like the trends are between all these different policies? And actually, I want to show one kind of the main takeaways here. And hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at this. But this part alone, right, to me is one of the key reasons here. We needed all those different policies and regulations and things, and the trust had essentially one that somehow was able to get the key elements into it. Now, when you look at it, the breakdown, you often found this kind of a mix of the trust policies, I should say, provided typically more concise, a breakdown. Sometimes it was more detailed, sometimes it was more broad, but it kind of got to the key points of the policy a little bit more clearly and concisely.
So can you scroll up and remind me what the headings are? Oh, you got it. Okay, so that's ASBA on the second
correct.
column.
Yeah, I apologize.
Trust on the third column. and
Right,
the differences
ASBA.
are summarized in that. Okay.
Right. We have trust here and obviously the differences. And so these policies in just the governing board meetings more or less were covered in a more concise policy with the trust. I'll jump down to the one I was looking at as well. Missed it here. Same thing, multiple policies with ASBA was summarized for the most part with a one policy that covered staff code of conduct. So that, and I'm happy to dig into any of these if anyone has specific questions, but I know you've had a chance to kind of look at some of this already. So overall, our takeaways were the trust policies were more concise, yet detailed and prescriptive. They were a little bit more, here's what needs to happen, versus kind of broad over kind of strokes of information. We have, again, we've already mentioned this, but the ability to navigate the website, see and understand the trust policies. My big reason for kind of leaning in this direction is you can have the greatest policy in the world, but if it's too hard for an employee to understand, or it's buried so deep in all these other policies and regulations and exhibits, then it's not necessarily going to be an effective policy to implement. And as we've already kind of mentioned, obviously driven by our attorneys helping to create this, it's a little more focused on limiting liability. What I found with, this was in both examples, but I found it much more common in the ASBA policies was I would pull up, and I think there's even one that I might be bringing to the board in a month here. There's a whole policy that is just, there's no real, what I would call district policy. It's just kind of restating what the law is. And which is, we need to know what the law is, but it's not necessarily for the board to decide. I've seen policies that says, you know, the local police department will do this, this, and that. And it's like, well, that's not for you to decide. That's the law decides that. And other things like that. So there's many parts of the ASBA policies that are helpful in terms of providing information about what the law states, but at the same time kind of bury all our more specific district policies. So that's part of the difference. Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment on that last bullet point that you got there? They're more focused on minimizing liability. My main concerns every day are keeping kids safe and helping kids be successful. So liability is not what drives, we're worried about this, but it's a big deal. I was just reading something, you may have seen this as well. Flagstaff Unified School District is facing a $55 million lawsuit for not doing something the parents felt they should have done at a camp. Kid got sick, bitten by a tick, actually, and it's had a recurring whatever thing. If you're talking about what's best for kids, you got to keep liability in the back of your mind all the time. Both policy services do a lot of things really well. ASBA has been really very useful in keeping us pointed in the right direction to avoid issues that are going to open us up to legal liability. I feel like the trust does that even better. So I don't know if you might look at that and say liability, whatever. I mean, our policies are really all about kids. Yeah, but you can't do much for kids if you pay $55 million to some family about something. So I appreciate that their focus is even more attuned to what is going to keep you functioning well. What's going to keep the limited resources you have in teachers' pockets and in kids' classrooms and whatnot. That's a big deal.
I guess to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, though, I question their minimizing liability aspect just from personal experience when we had our curriculum issues and, when it first came up that someone was filing an open meeting law complaint, our lawyer, part of the trust, said, no, this is not even going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to happen with it. Turns out that they were wrong, and we were found liable. So, I just, like at the law conference, I have a hard time listening to lawyers talk so much about the law as if it's just a neutral thing out there.
Not open to interpretation.
Yeah, and we got bad advice. We got bad advice, and we paid the price for that. Luckily, it wasn't a severe price, but we did pay the price for that. So that's part of my concern with the lawyers running things for us in this.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, to be clear, in that instance, there was no price that we paid. But
yeah,
there were two sets of attorneys who had opposing viewpoints on it. Went to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General said, well, yeah, actually, not your attorney PUSD, but the other set of attorneys is correct, but there's no penalty because it's really not a big deal. So it was kind of
but there was a penalty because we had to change our policies, and the entire state ended up having to change policies as a result. So there was a penalty attached to it. It wasn't severe. It wasn't a difficult thing, but I just still, I guess, have a personal issue with the poor advice that we got. And as board president during that time, it kind of hit me harder than maybe it should have.
Yeah, we were at the time relying on ASBA policies. It turns out they
I mean, our lawyer said, yeah, it's fine.
You're right.
You followed the law and you followed the policy, and then turns around and, nope, you didn't. You got to fix this, so. And it was just this kind of like, oh, but the law says this, so you got to do this. And I'm like, 3 weeks ago, you told us a different story.
Good point, good point.
So, you know, I'm a little hesitant since to listen to lawyers. And
Andy made a great point. Every lawsuit that's out there is the result of different sets of lawyers seeing things differently. So you can't just say, well, a lawyer said this, let's do it, right?
Right.
Good
And
point.
with that said, I want you to know that my role is to provide for the constituents of our district, including our staff and teachers, what they need to do the job. And if this is what they need to do the job, then that's what we need to provide for them. So I just want you to know that. My questions and my concerns are based more on like just a distrust for
Well, I
who we're
appreciate,
working with.
I appreciate that you're helping us look at this more carefully than we might have otherwise. If we decide if the board decides to make a change, it's a big decision. It's gonna be a lot of work on our part to do that.
Aren't ASBA policies also written by lawyers? Isn't that what they described when they came, is that there's a team of lawyers that also work on that same,
The main
their
two.
policies
Well,
are
go
also
ahead.
attorneys?
Yeah, I think the main folks that are writing it have a team of attorneys that are also reviewing it and making sure that it complies with Arizona law. So it's not that they're not at all doing it legally.
I
but
know that they are educators first. They're not lawyers, the two policy analysts that are reviewing policies.
Right, they're
But again,
focused on education, right?
I don't want that to color what we
Yeah.
do. We need to provide what's best for our staff to do the job they need to do. So that's my baseline.
And I'll just emphasize in a way this, and if anyone else wants to jump in, kind of the primary reason, but this idea that the trust policies are more concise and clear for us all to be able to say, what is this really saying? Because I'm sure some of you have seen some of the policies that have come to you in the past, and it's pages and pages and pages and pages, and like, what is this even saying exactly, or what's buried in here? Not that there's not going to be detailed policies with the trust as well, but in general, we found that it was more concise and kind of got to the point a little more clearly. So obviously, I wanted to share with you if the board decides to move forward with this, what this process would look like. And we certainly don't have the details figured out specifically, but if the board were to approve it, we would ask that the trust contract be approved in the coming month or so. We'd use the next several months after that to really do kind of a crosswalk between our current policies and the recommended policies with the trust and see how they're similar. Are there things that we want to add our own components to? For example, a couple months ago we had a policy about animals in schools, right? We have specifics that we say we want this, so we make sure that those elements are reflected. But go through that so we can have policies that we feel are appropriate for Prescott. And then we did reach out. Obviously, the trust has a lot of support that they'll provide us through that process. And we've also got, I'll say, commitments or support from other districts that said if you need help with this process, they'd be happy to help us with that as well. In the spring then, we'd be bringing you the actual policies to look over and review. We'd have to look at what the communication with the rest of the staff would look like so everybody's on the same page when it comes to it, with the idea that they'd be ready to implement by July 1 of next school year. So with that, I'll kind of, one, ask if there's any questions, but two, kind of ask if there's kind of general direction that you'd like to provide us going forward.
So Andy, to clarify, do you mind going back a slide?
Maybe if I can. There we go.
If you do, this is a discussion item. If we hear from discussion, the general feeling from the board is we're not interested in this. Great. That saves us a bunch of work in the short term. seems like there's some people interested in looking into this more. I think what we would do is come next month to you with a voting item. Would you approve a contract with the trust? And we wouldn't move to those policies right away, like Andy's saying. There's a ton of work to be done over the next 9 months or so. And then, but by July, when our current subscription for ASBA policy services expires, we'd come to you to actually shift over policies at that point. Or we could do that in waves as well.
Right.
Other districts have said, okay, we're looking at chapter 1 this month, and their board has said, okay, we're going to drop these policies and adopt these policies. So we might have a hybrid system for a couple of months. A lot of districts have done that. But again, if your discussion tonight brings up that for the most part, we're not interested, we feel like we're well served. And I would echo what Andy said. Generally speaking, we're well served. It's not like what we've been doing is a hot mess. We got to find something different. It's just, we've been driving a Pinto, and we're looking at driving a Taurus or something instead.
It's not an upgrade.
It may not be a big upgrade. If you feel like this Pinto is great, Pinto's been getting us from point A to point B, to be very clear. It's not like this is broken down on the side of the road. We got to buy something yesterday at all. It's not that. Taurus? Whatever.
But the
I was trying to think of something that wasn't like big flashy.
Big flashy car.
A Sentra, Nissan Sentra.
Yeah.
That's what I drive, fourth least expensive car that's available out there.
Do we have any idea of the amount of hours it will take, Sarah, to make this kind of a switch? And what the expectation is as far as what have other districts experienced as far as time on task? Because there's a cost to that, right? I mean, our time is not free. So do we know what to expect there?
It would be a meeting probably once or twice a month, and then you have to, compare each policy. There's 5 sections? And then bring that, what I've received, the input I've received is then they would bring section 1 as a first read to the board the next month, bring it as a second read, bring chapter 2 as a first read. So it's a process. It is going to take time. Whatever you want us to do.
And Sarah, am I remembering, and this will kind of piggyback on your question, Flagstaff's done this recently,
Yes.
right? And we reached out to them specifically and said, what'd you think? This is a lot of work. They said, it's golden. You should do it. If you need help, we'll help you. Here's what we did. And so we might look and see kind of what their model is. And everything Sarah said, another piece was that they had a small committee that was basically their Sarah and their Andy and their Clark, plus I think 2 board members, to look and say, okay, what do we want to migrate over as is, right? So we've got leave policy that I mentioned earlier that's substantially different than ASBA's model policy. Would we want to bring that over just as is? What does that look like? What recommendations does that little committee want to make to the board next time we bring it up? And which things are, if we got copyrighted policy now, we'd be moving to copyrighted policy later, that's easy. And most of it, like you saw, is easy, right? It's copyrighted policy, it's just a matter of looking at their crosswalk saying, we recommend this move right over, but we'd want to get eyes on each one. And you're not wrong, there's hours involved in this.
And if they're copyrighted policies, we couldn't take pieces of what we have in our existing policy if it wasn't something we wrote, if it was what ASBA had written originally, because we don't rewrite the whole thing generally. We add or subtract a few things here and there.
Yeah, essentially.
Those other items are protected by the copyright of ASBA, so we would have to take the changes that we made, and we can move those changes into the.
Right, if we look at a current policy that we've been using as a policy, we say, this is fantastic. We look at the trust equivalent, and we say, that's a mess. Let's just move the ASBA policy over. It's copyright, we can't do that. Good point. Yeah, it would have to be our own version that we could migrate over. We've not seen any examples of that yet. As all 3 of us have dug in pretty deeply, we've not seen anything where we said, the ASBA one's great, the trust one's a mess. We've seen a couple of counter examples of that where it felt like the ASBA one's kind of difficult to deal with, and the trust one is terrific. But for the most part, they're pretty equivalent. Quite equivalent.
What was the first year the trust policy program started?
The cost of it.
No,
First
just
year.
when did they
First
start?
year.
What year did they
What
start?
year did they start?
Year 3 or 4.
3 or 4 years?
It's relatively new.
Okay.
And some of it, I'll be frank, I guess, there were a lot of districts a few years ago when there was a lot of political turmoil, and people were saying, hey, we want to separate from ASBA, what other options do we have? And partially in response to that, the trust said, well, here's something, because there was another very ideologically driven kind of quasi-school board support organization that was coming up with their own thing that was just a mess. And the trust said, oh man, if anybody moves to that, they're potentially in trouble. The trust model policies are so much better than that. Maybe it's time to provide a third option. And the folks from the trust also said, we really feel like in terms of liability, their lawyers felt like our interpretation of law is better. And Andy, you're right. I mean, that's potentially fraud, right? We can point to a specific example of that in our recent past where one group of lawyers thought something was better and it wasn't.
I assume the trust has changed their policy to meet,
I'm confident they have.
meet the law, which ASBA also did, but, I mean, they have to, right?
Right.
Because
Every district
that
was
was the
caught
finding.
unawares,
So,
And we don't know what kind of changes that ASBA's making this year. I mean, is that something that we're hearing about?
It's a long process because of all the policies they have to go through. I mean, it's a really long process. So it's hard to see progress.
Is it likely, since ASBA's doing that as a board, we would be having all of those changes presented to us anyway, right, for us to review? So we're probably going to go through that process either with the trust or with ASBA in the coming.
It'd be simpler with ASBA for sure, yes. The
months
short
and
answer is
years.
yes. It's simpler with ASBA because it's going to look very similar. And we wouldn't have to do the back-end work that we're talking about here at all. ASBA says they're looking to consolidate, they're looking to clean up their language. You've already, I think, got one example of a
We have.
policy.
They've already kind of started that
87
process.
pages
And
long or something. It's a lot. It's a lot. But either way, we're looking at a lot. And probably, my view is there's less work in the short run to stay with ASBA, no question. There's probably more work in the long run to stay with ASBA is my view. But I mean, we're talking a 5, 6 year long run.
was there any interest in bringing it forward for a vote?
I'd be interested in voting on it next.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Next meeting.
Oh, next time, next month?
Yeah, it's not a voting item this month.
I think
Oh,
as
that's
far
right,
as
it's not.
timeline, it should be a voting item next month, because if we don't do it then, it's going
It
to
won't be on that.
It'll be too late.
be late.
If you haven't voted to move that direction, we're not going to do all the work. Let's just say that. We wouldn't have changed policies again, right? You're just giving us direction, voting that we're going to subscribe to what they've got. And either way, we're subscribed to ASBA for one more year, right? You remember that? There's a 3-year term, and we're in year 3 right now. They're both good. I'll go back to what Andy said before. They both work. They'll both get us from point A to point B. So regardless of what the board decides, we're going to be okay. Kids will be well served. We'll be able to make it work, et cetera. We just feel like there's one model that's better than the other model.
if there's, obviously, if you do move to have a vote next month, that'll give you time to look over it a little bit more, dig into it a little bit more in the next month, and feel free to
Right.
reach out if you have specific questions, or Andy, you had some questions that we got answers to. We can,
Yeah.
if there's additional questions, I can reach back out to either of them, either group, to get more answers.
The only one I would have is if we could find a district that may have
Right.
considered going but chose to
That's-
stay with
that's a great
ASBA.
question.
And what their reasoning was. Because we know what Flagstaff is going to say, we know what Queen Creek is going to say.
Right.
But I'd like to hear what those alternate.
You might be able to reach out through your ASPA
Yeah,
group and say, is there anybody in this situation?
right.
That's really a good thought.
All right. I think, let's bring it to the next agenda, or next board meeting, and agendize it under a voting item, please.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item 6C3, request for future agenda items. So we mentioned one, and then the other one was, we wanted to
Mentioned
know
2
more.
now, right?
Yeah, what
You
was
want to have a discussion, it sounded like, about
Yes.
what communication you put out to staff members and parents regarding 40 weeks.
Information discussion only, please, on that one.
Great.
Just a question on that, if I can. Is Is that a time-sensitive issue that you feel we need to get something out right away?
I've-
or-
I'll be honest, I've not run into anybody who's panicking or who said, I
Okay.
heard this, but I have heard secondhand that there's people who said, no, I'm well informed and
Yeah.
we're moving to that next year. That worries me a little bit.
That's
I
exactly
have, on the other hand, run into, I think I told you, like probably 20 different people, almost everywhere I go, people say, whatever happened to that? I'm like, do you not read the paper? No. But we haven't communicated about that explicitly. We probably should. It's a high-interest item for a lot of people. We said, hey, what do you think? And then some
First week in
people think
October.
it's been silenced, and that hasn't been silenced. The information's available and out there, but it's,
So you think wait till October is what you're suggesting?
Well, I don't know if I'm suggesting that. I just want to be sure that we don't have time-sensitive demands being placed
Good question.
on Clark, that they need to get an answer to this immediately, and he's going to have to reply, as opposed to us coming up with a statement that would say.
do any of you, what do you think, you guys, about time sensitive? You've heard from various people. Do we need to get something out soon? You know, okay.
I think another month would be all right.
Just building off what you said about
Yeah.
the worry and stuff, all of the kids that I've talked to at PHS, when there were kind of rumors going around that we were going to be moving to that, there were concerns that they had about it. They were definitely a little worried.
Okay.
I think
So.
it is time sensitive.
When your email to us came out, you
Yeah.
had mentioned some different options. Sam, you said this earlier, if we all give our feedback to you and allow Sarah to take all of our feedback and see if we can create this is what the board has come up with, and then send it out for us to review, I don't know that it has to take place at a meeting.
Yeah, that is true.
It wouldn't.
Because
Wouldn't
it's
need to,
not a
yeah.
voting item so much as it is just a
Communication.
communication from the
Communication.
board.
Yeah.
And as long as we all approve the communication in the end.
And you feel like because yeah, that would be a platform where none of us are discussing it. So we put it through.
Correct.
We're
yeah.
each
Once it-
individually
Through
responding
Clark.
without
Right.
each other's, I mean, I think the public knows we don't ever email all of us on an email.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that never happens, that we don't ever see each other's emails or responses to things.
Yeah.
So.
You all
it would-
comfortable with
Each
that route?
individually,
Yeah,
we
I
would
think so,
respond,
so we
and
respond
maybe
to
we'd get a
Clark.
response out a little faster than if
Yeah.
we wait for another board meeting.
Let's do that.
But maybe we
Okay.
start with.
But if there's a lot of conflict between us, then we could definitely agendize it instead.
And
Like-
we'll know by,
I've heard back from 3 of you already, and not exactly the same feedback, but overlapping enough that I think we would plan. When I hear back from the other 2 of you, if it's a great variance from that, I'll get back to you and say, here's what I've heard, what do you think? And we may need to agendize it, but if it's kind of overlapping, we can go with what we talked about, which is, one person come up with a draft, goes through Sarah, back out to you so rather than communicating with each other directly, which is not okay, communicating through Sarah or myself can be done. And you can come up with a final draft of something that reflects all of your thoughts about what you want to share with people. That's one thing that could work.
For younger students, do we have, I'm assuming that you guys are in favor of doing the 4-day system, correct?
Necessarily.
Not
No.
necessarily.
I wouldn't
Nope.
assume
That's
that.
what
no.
we. need
That's
the
why we're
public
trying to put a
know, is
communication out,
that-
is because some people are assuming that,
Right.
and that
People
hasn't
don't
been the.
realize that we actually haven't made any decisions at all.
Okay.
Other than we've had some really good
We just got a
discussion about
survey
it,
out.
but we really haven't made the decision. And so people think there's decisions made, but I think none of us have fully committed one way or the other.
And from my perspective, I feel like 4-day system would kind of hurt younger students or parents that can't, or necessarily stay-at-home moms. Like, for
Right.
example, my mom works, my dad works, so when I was younger, if this would have been implemented, the 4-day system, I wouldn't have anywhere to go after school. And I think that that's a big concern.
Yeah, we actually have to be careful about discussing it in any more depth because it's not agendized for today. I'll just tell you that's something that came up,
We've already
and
thought about
the draft plan that the board has come up with addresses that. Some place for kids to go on Friday. You probably don't mean after school, you meant on Fridays, is my guess, but yeah.
yeah, a lot of different factors, but.
There's a
so-
ton of things to keep in mind, and that's really good feedback.
And we've done a lot of sessions over there, so that's what we're trying to lay out, is that there's a lot of information out there, and that'll be in the correspondence, so. Good. So let's go that route. If we find that there is many different, opinions or direction, then we'll reserve the right to bring it to the agenda
Great.
for next month.
I
But right
think
now,
that-
you're giving us
yeah.
administrative direction to kind of take one of those
To
first
me,
2
I think the
options.
most important thing right now is that might be time sensitive is to let people know that this is not a decision. This is just a survey that went out to see what interest the public had in going that way. So, and I think that's where the misinformation's coming out right now. People
Yeah,
are
yeah.
assuming that we made a decision and we didn't. So that, to me, is one of the most important things to get out of it.
If you love
is
it,
that
take a deep breath,
it's,
because you haven't decided.
nobody's
If you
made a
hate it,
decision
take a
on
deep
any
breath,
of this.
because you haven't decided.
Any other items? Mention? Okay.
Didn't we discuss something last month that we thought we wanted to put on the agenda?
Is there a third thing?
Nobody remembers that? but
Sarah
me?
keeps pretty good minutes.
Oh, yeah, Sarah would know that. Okay, then we
Keeps
did
us on
it.
track.
She would have told us. That's right. Okay.
If we are gonna move forward with the bond override, do we need to take a step in that direction? Do we need
That's
to
a
put it
great
on
question.
the agenda? Do we need to have a discussion about it? Do we need to?
When was the timing on that? Was it this fall that we had to start discussing?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're moving into fall. October would be next meeting.
And that might be helpful to communicate with the idea of the 4-day school, and so if we have a discussion on it soon, it might.
Would
or
you like us
just-
to
just
add that
next
as a
steps, I
discussion item?
guess.
First
think-
public discussions of what you might do and
I'm hearing
questions
yes,
and stuff?
Yeah,
I
I think so.
I think
I think
we ought to
so.
head in that direction.
I don't know if we should link the two. You're not suggesting we
Right.
link 4 days with an override.
Well, I think it's part of the message. A reason why we delayed the 4-day decision was because we prioritized the override.
One could impact the other, but yeah, in your communication, you might reference it, but since you haven't had any real in-depth discussions, so it's best to be clear that, that one could impact the other, but you've made no decisions about either of them at this point. Hopefully, we'll have a really good person draft with the first draft of the letter.
Agreed.
Pull
All
all
right.
those threads together.
All right, I think that's a good start. Okay, so our next meeting is October 14th, right after spring break, or fall break, right? All right, good deal. And then a 9/11 ceremony at PHS as well as Taylor Hicks Patriot Day.
I think
fall
Mile
break.
High's doing something as well, right?
Is the
Mile High will
Viajet
do
still
it there.
doing their
They're doing their lunch.
Oh, you
heroes
do yours?
luncheon?
They are.
Viajet is from 10:45 to 12:25.
10, say that again, Haley?
10:45 to 12:25.
And it's your heroes luncheon again,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
And what about Mile High? Are they doing something?
Yeah,
Because
they
it
are.
wasn't on here.
courtyard there. Yeah.
They're doing it as well, right
They'll
after
do it kind of between the
Taylor Hicks?
PHS one and the Taylor Hicks one.
Right.
Between,
Gotcha.
so it would be
At
high
like 8 a.m.
school,
If you wanted to catch
Mile
all three,
High,
yeah,
Taylor Hicks, a Viajet.
yep. And then
Not
the
sure
Heroes
when
Luncheon
they- all those.
event that I think you got started, right, Jane, you and Carol?
Yes, Carol
At
and I.
AJ
Yeah, we can't let it go.
decades
That's
ago.
right.
I know.
That's a pretty neat opportunity as well.
It is very
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah, just shows.
And there's discussions in each of our schools about this.
Mm-hmm.
But just FYI, really, really quick, up until this year, it was mandated by the legislature that K through 12, some discussion of 9/11 happen, and they changed the law this year and said, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, let's have it be 7 through 12. So it's still mandated 7 through 12, we've always done that, but you don't have to, be a kindergarten teacher who says,
We
well,
can
let's
still-
talk about.
We can talk about our heroes.
Yeah, right. There's super age-appropriate things that happen at a couple of our elementary
Very
schools, right? But it's no longer mandated, everybody in the state has to talk about this in a certain way on a certain day, so.
That's good schools. All right, thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.